A year ago, I released a video about famous people on CNBC and Bloomberg making predictions about stock market. And I kept a journal of people predicting economy for 3 years since 2020, and I made a video 1 year ago about it. So now 1 year later, it's time to do an update video about this. I would like to give you a disclaimer. All I say here is my own opinions and my opinions only. It's not a financial advice. The one key difference this video has compared to video 1 year ago is that I will also include some famous internet personalities such as Sven Carlin, Daniel Prank, and a few others making predictions and how well they did those predictions. Also, I will talk a little bit more about investment banks such as JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs specifically. And I will not be too detailed like in the first video. So if you want to learn about details, how I do the measurements and so on, accuracy, watch the first video. And here we go. I start my video with top best predictors for overall 4 years. And you can see some familiar faces from the previous video, but also some new ones. So Tom Lee is here, and Tom Lee has an accuracy of 1.75, so it's above 0. I remind you that anything positive means you would generally make money on his advice, while negative would up to -5 would mean you would lose money. If you did all the investments based on a person's advice. So Tom Lee did pretty well, despite skepticism that he was always too positive. There were some moments when he was not that positive, but overall, good rating, good job, Tom Lee. A newcomer here is Steve Eastman, is one of those famous big shot investors in 2008 who shorted CDOs. So he did some comments on CNBC and was pretty good at his predictions. He's a newcomer because there were not as many his statements that are recorded during 4 years, but it accumulated to good enough number of measurements to put him here. And in general, I only put here people who have enough statements to calculate decent average. Then famous billionaire Paul Tudor Jones, he's one of my favorites, so he scored pretty well. Ray Dalio was not very favorable in my previous video, but in this one he kind of recovered, and his comments were in generally were positive, and if you respected his advice, he would make money. And Ed Giordani is a frequent contributor on CNBC. He's a PhD economist, an investment consultant, not a billionaire like Ray Dalio or Paul Tudor Jones, obviously, but he did some good comments, and if you followed them during last few years, you would make money. Now comes the 5 guys. If you follow the advice in the last 4 years, generally you would lose money. And I think the primary reason why they didn't perform well was that everybody expected like bad times and huge market crash, which never came. So these guys were in general more pessimistic, and the comments I did showed that they didn't were right about the predictions. So first comes Gundlach and this pretty negative score. The guy is a bond king. So the former bond king was a PIMCO guy, I think Bill Gross his name. So now you can say Gundlach is a new bond king, and bond people, they usually like to be pessimistic because people buy more bonds. They're essentially salesmen for bonds, so I understand that kind of sentiment there. Now what is surprising is Druckenmiller is considered one of the best investors in the world, a billionaire, but if you follow his advice, he was not really good. On the other hand, if you look at his recent statements, I think in October 2024, he was in line with Paul Tudor Jones. They both said that bonds are terrible investment at that moment and you need to short them. And if you follow that advice from Druckenmiller and Paul Tudor Jones, you would make money because the rates of bonds generally went higher, especially for long-term bonds. Meanwhile, Federal Reserve was lowering the base rate, so this was a bit surprising move on bond yields, and these two guys were correctly predicting that. And of course, everything can change in future, but as of now, remember these measurements are as of now. Maybe just tomorrow from when I make this video, there will be a huge market crash. And these guys who were negative turn out to be right. But as of now, as I make this video, if you follow the advice of people on this list, you would lose money. Then famous guy Jim Cramer actually has not very negative rating of just minus 0.2. So he actually, you would lose money with him, but not terribly like with some other guys on this list. Now, a record breaker is David Rosenberg, former Merrill Lynch guy. So he, well, we know what happened to Merrill in 2008, but I don't want to say anything bad, but he was too negative, like terribly negative, always predicting terrible crashes during recent times. So I don't know. Then Leon Cooperman is actually a famous billionaire, and he was not given good advice, it seems. At least, again, subjectively from what I heard, because I just occasionally check websites, CNBC, Bloomberg, watch videos, and once I do that, that's what I see, and I record it in my journal. Last year I shared my journal using Excel that I was sending to those who wanted it, but this year the journal is actually on T-Economics website, so you can just use it, and link will be in the description of this video. And essentially now it's much better organized. You have the whole journal as this, and all the scoring is here. The most recent records do not have scores yet because too little time passed. I usually at least allow 3 months before I do the scoring. And you can also look at all the people and companies that made predictions. So here you can select Morgan Stanley. So here what Morgan Stanley said in the news, and sometimes you also have some specific analysts from Morgan Stanley. And the reason why I handle banks like this is because very often you can see opinions of analysts from the banks different from CEOs of the banks. This is famously was noticed with JP Morgan, that CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, was quite negative on the economy, but some of his analysts were much more positive. So that's why banks are like this. So Jamie Dimon actually has a positive 0.2 score on average, and I only do averages for those who have more than 5 records at least, and that's how I handle banks. So banks were actually decent. I cannot say they were manipulating market too much. Some of analysts made mistakes, but some did good calls, like this one is pretty good call, like don't buy small caps in essentially July 2024. A good advice there from Mr. Wilson. And let's also go to Goldman Sachs. Here we go. So there are different analysts there and people. So actually pretty good scores from 2021, 2023, 2024. So Goldman Sachs actually is not lying or anything. They actually say things that are very probable, I would say. So yeah, Druckenmiller sometimes was right as well, but he was just more often wrong, at least in my records. So that's the journal. Please feel free to use it. There is total average score, huge change from my first video. it was total average was negative, so now the total average is actually slightly positive, which is great. You would make money if you followed all the advices. So in this journal update I included some internet personalities in the space of investing, and I want to introduce 4 of them that I track quite often. And so far I don't have enough records to give them scores, but I will introduce them first and I'll show some of the records there, but we'll probably see how they did in a year from now. So first is Meet Kevin. I watched him all the way before he went into stocks. I watched him as a real estate guy. He was quite knowledgeable about California and real estate in California, and recently he switched to stocks, and we'll see how he did. Then Sven Carlin is a guy from somewhere in Europe. He is far no a PhD economist, and he likes value investing, all the macro analysis, all that fundamental stuff. Then there is this quite opposite, you can say, an educated economist, internet personality. So he records these long videos from his car. Sometimes I like to listen to them when I'm in a car, and he just talks. He self-taught himself macroeconomics and talks about all that stuff, good stuff in Federal Reserve Bank and so on. And I think he works in lumber industry, something like that. Then finally Daniel Prank, a Canadian famous YouTuber, and he also has some good advice and some bad advice on his YouTube videos with specific stocks in mind, and I started tracking him as well. So we start with Meet Kevin. As you can see, most of his predictions were not so good, at least the ones I tracked, and essentially I think I covered this hypo stock in a previous video, and it was a pretty bad investment there. That's back when he, as I understand, didn't know a lot about stocks yet, and he was more into real estate. And I think it was something to do with real estate, that stock. So most recent prediction is still actually I think good. This one, 50-point cut on September. I think this one will get a good score. It's just too recent to give a score. So this will be probably +5. And we'll see how it goes. So that's Meet Kevin. Then we go to Daniel Prank. And I don't have a lot of records yet. I'm sorry, I probably need to do more. Now we go to Sven Carlin. Let's see. Only one record so far, bubble in the market, so stay away from market 23. Yeah, that is not a good advice for investing. The stocks grew a lot since then. But I just started tracking him, so we'll see. And finally, an educated economist, one good record and one not so good. Says the Fed lowers rate just before recession hits, suggesting we are about to see one, but it didn't happen. Yeah, it didn't happen. So you need to be invested in stocks to make money. That's it, guys. That's my update, and in 1 year I will do another one for 5 years. It's a small anniversary there.